credible rape allegation comes out on Politico. It's one of the victim was actually someone who had given a statement to the New York Times, but had not said that it was, did not want it to be reported that it was rape, and she changed her mind. And yeah, it's done. It's over. Put a fork in it, right? The campaign is done. Now, obviously, I'm going to be talking about like what this means for the Senate majority and what this means for Maine in general. What I will say about Graham Platner is what I've said from the start. The red flags were there, but these red flags were totally immaterial for the voters in Maine. And that my assessment on this was the silver lining, which is something that I tweeted, I think like right after the Graham Platner announcement, or right after, like this was months in the past. And I've talked about this extensively. The silver lining always was, it seems like people are invested in a candidate that will say those things. Because the reality of the matter is, it's Graham Platner's background and his personal moral failings that did him in. But his campaign outside of that was a phenomenal campaign. That's precisely the reason why he put up insane numbers against the fucking existing centrist hand-selected candidate that is the governor of the state. That's important. That's important analysis. And I'm never going to shy away from giving you that analysis. My job is twofold. And I feel like there's been a lot of crosstalk on my perspective versus my analysis on the race and what this says about the appetite for change. One of the first tweets that I had on the Graham Platner issue was more so about like the broad appetite that people had all around the country, including in a state like Maine. That's a very old state, very white state. And I asked the question that I repeatedly asked over and over again. Does this mean that people have an appetite for the policies, or do they simply like that Graham Platner is a white guy and looks the part? And this was a question that I had for the Mainers. And that question remains to be seen, because the comparison I always made was between Platner with obvious red flags versus Abdullah Syed. So it's seeing a lot of libs defend Platner over establishment pick Janet Mills because he has a leftist platform, and it seems like they're tired of the status quo electability arguments of the Dems. Now imagine if you had a candidate who didn't have a Blackwater CV and a totem cough. But many people will take the advantage, take the time out of their busy days, they're not usually doing anything else, to make it seem as though I did not have a much more scrutinized opinion on Graham Platner as opposed to many of these other candidates. And I will tell you exactly why. There's a difference that I have, a difference in opinion that I have with many of the people that don't work on these sorts of campaigns in any way, shape, or form with other candidates who will go out and maybe door knock, go out and maybe phone bank, but they're not looking at the situation with a broader vision of winning the Senate majority. There are plenty of people in this coalition in the Democratic Party that are dog shit, okay? Policy-wise, background-wise, just horrible overall. Many people that I'm not going to actively go out and endorse, but many Democratic senators, for example, that have to be a part of this coalition, regardless, just to have the numbers and the seats, okay? Because at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, a Democratic representative or a Democratic senator is going to be better than a Republican one. And Graham Platner was no different. But to simply say that this was just a lesser evil harm reduction attitude would be also incorrect. For Graham Platner's race, what I was interested in always was the fact that he was an unashamed left populist. Now, the problem that comes along with that is that his stink, his background, and the things that he did will now be slammed into every other Bernie endorsed candidacy, which is devastating. Am I wrong to have made the assessment that Graham Platner, given his policies, regardless of his red flags, was still a better choice than Susan Collins and Janet Mills? No. with the current information that we have on Graham Platner, obviously it's an entirely different predicament. If Graham Platner had credible accusations of conducting war crimes in the same way that he has a credible accusation of rape, then that would have been irredeemable as well. But for a lot of people, their assessment directly stemmed from the fact that he went and did 4 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq and then joined Blackwater. For me, the Blackwater thing was the biggest red flag. The Blackwater thing and the Totenkopf tattoo was major red flags, should have been seen in the vetting process, and it should have absolutely been a red flag that was, that would have stopped him from running. But I think, and I can only make this assessment because I have no connection to these people that hand selected this candidate, they saw a guy who was capable of delivering a charismatic speech, which, for the record, regardless of his immoral nature, that part still remains to be true, especially in a state like Maine. He was a candidate that was capable of exciting a lot of older white voters. Now, there's varying degrees of support that were thrown in the direction of Graham Platner. I myself, of course, were at times talking about how ridiculous some of the campaigns were coming from people who were openly pro-Israel and were taking that position because they were pro-Israel. It wasn't because of it wasn't because they had seen red flags or anything. It was very clear that they were like, Graham Platner is anti-Israel. I'm pro-Israel. That's it. I hate it. If Platner were a Republican, his rape allegation would have helped his campaign. If Platner was a Republican, he probably would not drop out. No one would demand he drop out. My position on this is the exact same. The fact that there is a lot of momentum, the fact that there was a lot of momentum behind this guy, a unknown entity who was able to defeat in the primaries the governor of the state, okay, the establishment hand-selected candidate that the field was cleared for, regardless of those red flags, like the Totenkopf tattoo, the Blackwater CV, and some less favorable things that he had said on Reddit many years ago, right? Regardless of all of that, he actually fucking destroyed. He destroyed Janet Mills. Bill's Mafia till the bitter end. There's an important lesson there, okay? That's what I'm interested in. That's what I've been interested in, and that's what I will continue being interested in. Now, the lesson could be one of two things. One, it could literally be because he's a white guy who said that, he had redeemed himself, he had gotten better, he had issues with PTSD, like he was capable of telling a really good story. DSA never endorsed Graham Platner. They simply suggested him on the ballot as an acceptable substitute to Janet Mills and to Susan Collins, which is my position as well. Recommendations are not endorsements, and even endorsements do not mean that someone is a DSA candidate in general. You could be a DSA endorsed candidate like Troy Jackson was for governor. That doesn't mean Troy Jackson is, I don't think Troy Jackson was a part of the DSA. I think the important lesson here is, once again, to demand more proper vetting and not to go out to bat, even to the degree that I did on campaigns like Graham Platner's. Even though I hedged my commentary over and over again and had many private and some public disagreements with the likes of even FD Signifier, Cavernickel as well, and defended certain people like Chris Rabb when they criticized Graham Platner, defended FD's criticisms of Graham Platner. I still thought that he would be a better substitute for Susan Collins or for Janet Mills.